When the name Zohran Mamdani began trending on social media, few expected it would be connected to one of New York's most talked-about campaign controversies. Reports started surfacing that over $1.8 million in campaign-related spending had quietly moved through external channels, raising questions about who really funded the Assemblyman's rise and what they expected in return. In a political climate where transparency defines credibility, this revelation has stirred both outrage and disbelief. Supporters call it a smear campaign. Critics say it's proof of hypocrisy from a man who built his career on progressive ideals. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between perception and reality. Tonight, we uncover how $1.8 million in alleged secret spending became the center of a storm around one of New York's most promising voices. This is the untold story behind the headlines, the rise, the scandal, and the silence that followed. Zohran Mamdani #campaign transparency. In the heart of Astoria, Queens, a new generation of politics was born when Zohran Mamdani emerged as one of the most talked-about progressive voices in New York. His campaign promised transparency, equality, and justice. He spoke the language of the people, walked through the neighborhoods that shaped his identity, and represented a new era of accountability in American politics. Yet, somewhere behind those idealistic speeches, questions were quietly forming. Questions about how a grassroots candidate managed to build such an effective campaign machine in such a short amount of time. The story began when investigative journalists at an independent watchdog group, at NY Politics Watch, started noticing discrepancies between reported donations and third-party expenditures connected to Mamdani's campaign. These weren't minor accounting mistakes. The differences involved hundreds of thousands of dollars that didn't seem to appear in any official filing. The figure that raised the most eyebrows? $1.8 million. Money that, according to reports, flowed through channels outside the direct campaign account, funneled through organizations and individuals who had strong political interests in Queens and beyond. As word spread, it wasn't long before the whispers turned into headlines. Local news outlets began asking how such a large sum could move undetected within a campaign that had publicly pledged full transparency. The documents, some leaked, some sourced from public filings, painted a picture of a complex web of spending. There were consulting contracts that appeared inflated, advertising expenses that didn't match actual airtime, and contributions from advocacy groups that were indirectly connected to super PACs. Each detail added another layer to the puzzle, suggesting that Mamdani's clean campaign image might not have been as simple as it appeared. For many of his supporters, the news was shocking. Here was a man who had built his platform on exposing inequality and challenging the influence of money in politics. Zohran Mamdani had openly criticized corporate-funded politicians, insisting that real change could only come from grassroots support. So when his name began appearing alongside phrases like shadow funding and dark money, it struck at the very core of his credibility. His opponents seized the opportunity, framing him as another politician who had promised integrity but succumbed to the temptations of power. But politics, as always, is not black and white. As journalists continued to investigate, some began to notice patterns that suggested a broader system at play. The $1.8 million wasn't just about one politician, it was about how campaign finance laws create loopholes that even the most well-intentioned candidates can fall into. In New York, coordination between campaigns and independent expenditure groups is a gray area, technically restricted, but difficult to monitor in practice. It's possible, analysts said, that Mamdani's campaign simply benefited from an ecosystem that operates this way across the political spectrum. Still, for the public, perception is everything. Hashtags like #Zohran Mamdani exposed and #Follow the Money began trending on X and Instagram, sparking online debates about whether Mamdani's integrity could survive this scandal. Supporters launched their own hashtags, such as #StandWithZohran, claiming that the accusations were part of a coordinated effort to discredit a politician who had dared to challenge entrenched power structures. Behind the scenes, political strategists scrambled to contain the fallout. Internal memos circulated within progressive circles, advising staff and volunteers on how to respond to media inquiries. Some were told to emphasize Mamdani's track record of advocacy, while others were instructed to remain silent until an official statement could be released. Meanwhile, opposition research teams from rival parties began digging deeper, hoping to uncover more damaging details. One of the most intriguing discoveries came from campaign vendors who had worked on similar elections in the area. According to anonymous sources, there were payment records that connected Mamdani's campaign consultants to a super PAC that had run parallel advertising campaigns in his district. While direct coordination would be illegal under state law, proving intent is nearly impossible. What it suggested, however, was that the $1.8 million might not have been a single transfer but rather a network of indirect funding that amplified his message without leaving an obvious trace. This revelation reignited the debate about campaign finance reform. Critics argued that even if no laws were technically broken, the moral implications were clear. Transparency must apply not only to candidates but also to the organizations supporting them. Others countered that in a system flooded with corporate money, grassroots candidates like Mamdani were often forced to compete on an uneven playing field. Without comparable funding, they said, progressive voices risked being drowned out by better-funded rivals. As the investigation deepened, more records surfaced: communications between campaign volunteers, donors, and digital ad agencies. Some messages hinted at prior knowledge of the independent expenditures, while others suggested that Mamdani himself may not have been directly involved. A senior campaign staffer, speaking anonymously, claimed that Zohran was never in the loop about how every dollar was spent. He trusted people to handle the financial logistics so he could focus on his message. Whether that was an honest offense or a strategic diversion remains unclear. By this stage, the story had grown beyond the numbers. It became a reflection of how political ideals often collide with the realities of running modern campaigns. Even the most ethical candidates must navigate a system designed to reward influence, connections, and funding networks that operate in the shadows. As one political analyst put it, if this can happen to someone like Zohran Mamdani, imagine what's happening with those who don't even pretend to play fair. The public reaction was divided, but one thing was undeniable. The image of Zohran Mamdani as a flawless reformer had been fractured. He remained vocal on social issues, continuing to post about housing rights and racial justice, but every tweet now attracted comments linking back to the scandal. Memes, parodies, and critical threads flooded social media platforms, amplifying both outrage and skepticism. By the time the first official inquiries were announced, the narrative had already taken root in the public consciousness. Whether fair or exaggerated, it had become the defining controversy of Mamdani's political career. And while $1.8 million might not be an astronomical sum in national politics, its symbolic weight carried enormous implications. It questioned not just where the money came from, but what it said about the promises of transparency, the fragility of public trust, and the thin line between ambition and compromise. #Zohran Mamdani #campaign finance #political transparency #Queen's politics. As the story developed, the trail of the $1.8 million began to take a more defined shape. Investigative teams from independent outlets like at City News Watch and at NY Politics Watch traced several key transactions that seemed to connect political consultants, third-party organizations, and digital advertising firms operating under contract with progressive advocacy groups. What emerged was a complex network that blurred the boundaries between campaign financing and independent political spending. In one case, a communications firm reportedly linked to Mamdani's campaign was discovered to have received payments for community outreach that coincided with the release of online ad campaigns praising Mamdani's housing policy proposals. The ads, however, were funded not by his official campaign committee but by an external nonprofit organization advocating for affordable housing in New York City. The same firm, according to financial disclosures, had worked on several Democratic primary campaigns during the same period. This overlap raised the possibility of coordinated messaging, a violation if proven intentional. The Watchdog report, which broke the story publicly, stopped short of directly accusing Zohran Mamdani of orchestrating the network himself. Instead, it suggested that his campaign may have indirectly benefited from activities conducted by groups sympathetic to his platform. But in the fast-moving world of social media, nuance rarely survives. Within hours of the report's release, the headline "Mamdani's $1.8 million secret network" was trending across platforms, accompanied by heated debates, accusations, and a wave of misinformation. #Zohran Mamdani quickly became one of the most searched political names online. Memes appeared depicting him surrounded by cash, while others defended him with captions like "They fear real change" and "Attacked for helping the people." As polarized voices dominated the conversation, the actual facts became tangled in a web of speculation. Some claimed foreign donors might be involved, others insisted the controversy was entirely fabricated by rivals within the party. Meanwhile, inside campaign headquarters, sources described an atmosphere of controlled panic. Staffers were reportedly instructed to review all public statements and donations from the last election cycle to identify potential compliance risks. Legal counsel was brought in to assess whether the campaign had unwittingly crossed any ethical or legal lines. A confidential memo obtained by NY Insider Press stated, "While we maintain that no rules were intentionally violated, we must be prepared to demonstrate full transparency to the Board of Elections." The next few days saw a surge in media coverage. Major outlets like the New York Post and Politico NY picked up the story, each offering their own interpretation. One headline read, "Progressive darling faces dark money questions." Another, "How $1.8 million slipped through loopholes." Analysts began dissecting New York's campaign finance laws on air, explaining how independent expenditures often function as an open secret in political races, technically separate, but strategically aligned. Amid this storm, Mamdani maintained a careful silence. His X account, usually active with commentary on local issues, went quiet. His team declined multiple requests for interviews, issuing only a brief written statement that read, "Assemblyman Mamdani has always operated with integrity and transparency. Any claims suggesting improper coordination are false. We remain committed to the people of Queens and to the values that guided our campaign from day one." But silence, as history shows, often speaks louder than words. Political commentators began questioning whether the Assemblyman's reluctance to address the controversy directly indicated internal turmoil or legal caution. At NY Politics Forum tweeted, "If there's nothing to hide, why not face the public? Transparency isn't selective." The post went viral, amplifying doubts among undecided voters. Meanwhile, the watchdog groups behind the investigation expanded their research. They began analyzing communications between the campaign's digital media team and certain advocacy organizations. Leaked emails from one consultant hinted at discussions about message synchronization, aligning ad timing and language to reinforce the campaign's main talking points. While this doesn't necessarily prove coordination, it provided critics with ammunition to claim that the campaign and its allies had crossed a line. Behind closed doors, allies within the progressive movement urged Mamdani to address the issue head-on. They feared that continued silence could erode trust among supporters who valued transparency above all else. In private meetings, advisors reportedly debated whether to release all internal financial records voluntarily, a risky move that could either clear his name or expose further inconsistencies. Publicly, however, the narrative continued to spiral. News outlets invited campaign finance experts to explain how $1.8 million could move through loosely regulated channels without direct accountability. One expert explained, "It's not that the system is broken, it's that it's built this way. Independent groups can spend unlimited amounts as long as they don't coordinate directly with a candidate. The question isn't whether Mamdani did it, but whether anyone can prove he didn't." That uncertainty became the focal point of the story. The $1.8 million wasn't just a number anymore, it was a symbol of how murky political funding had become. Hashtags like #Where did the money go and #Campaign finance crisis started trending, with users tagging at Zohran Mamdani in every post demanding answers. Public trust, once his greatest strength, was beginning to erode. As the scandal unfolded, rival politicians seized the moment. Some called for formal investigations, while others subtly used the controversy to bolster their own credibility. "We can't claim to fight corruption while hiding behind technicalities," said one fellow assembly member during a televised interview, clearly alluding to Mamdani without naming him directly. Even among his supporters, cracks began to appear. Volunteers who had once championed his grassroots authenticity expressed frustration over the lack of transparency. "We believed in him because he wasn't like the others," one former campaign worker told at Metro NY. Now, it feels like that trust is being tested. As public scrutiny intensified, analysts began to question whether Mamdani could politically survive the scandal. His reputation had been built on moral clarity, the idea that progressive politics could be both idealistic and clean. But in a system dominated by financial power, remaining spotless often proves impossible. The narrative was no longer about one politician's alleged misstep. It was about whether the progressive movement itself could hold its moral ground in the rough arena of American politics. In the final week of that media frenzy, a new report surfaced claiming that some of the organizations tied to the $1.8 million had received grants from national advocacy networks that frequently fund Democratic campaigns across the country. The revelation added another layer of complexity. Was this truly a local scandal, or part of a larger web of political influence stretching beyond New York? As investigators followed the paper trail further, one thing became clear: the $1.8 million wasn't an isolated transaction. It was part of a much broader story about how money flows through American politics, legally, strategically, and often invisibly. The question that remained was simple, but powerful. Did Zohran Mamdani knowingly benefit from this network, or was he merely a pawn in a system designed to blur accountability? #political scandal, #Zohran Mamdani, #campaign transparency, #follow the money. The weeks following the initial reports transformed the $1.8 million story from a political controversy into a full-scale public drama. Everywhere from community gatherings in Queens to national talk shows, the conversation revolved around Zohran Mamdani and what the allegations meant for the integrity of progressive politics. Journalists camped outside his office, and every public appearance became a potential headline. The media was relentless, but the public's curiosity was even greater. Who funded the campaign? Who authorized the spending? And most importantly, did Mamdani know? Inside the New York State Assembly, colleagues who had once applauded his fiery speeches began to distance themselves. One assembly member reportedly told at NY Politics Wire, "Zohran's message has always been about transparency and reform. This entire situation just undercuts everything he stood for." The silence among other progressives spoke volumes. Many feared that defending him publicly could associate them with a scandal that was still unfolding in unpredictable directions. Meanwhile, the story began to fracture into competing narratives. Supporters of Mamdani claimed this was a deliberate smear campaign orchestrated by establishment figures threatened by his growing influence. "They can't beat him politically, so they are trying to bury him ethically," wrote one viral post on X tagged with #StandWithZohran and #HandsOffProgressives. Others, including independent watchdogs, maintained that the evidence was too significant to dismiss as political maneuvering. For them, this wasn't just about one politician, it was about systemic transparency and how ideals often collapse under financial pressure. The broader public reaction was mixed. Many of Mamdani's supporters from immigrant communities and working-class neighborhoods still viewed him as one of their own. They believed that even if mistakes were made, his intentions were genuine. "Zohran helped us when no one else did," a community organizer from Astoria told at City Voice NY. "People forget that politics isn't clean. It's survival." Yet, critics were less forgiving, arguing that principles are only meaningful when upheld under pressure. "You can't campaign on transparency and then hide behind technicalities," said one activist on a live broadcast. The online discourse intensified with every passing day. Threads dissected donation records, screenshots of emails, and leaked text messages, some authentic, others completely fabricated. The information chaos made it nearly impossible to separate truth from rumor. Even credible reports were drowned out by sensational headlines designed to feed the algorithm. The scandal had evolved into a digital wildfire, spreading far beyond New York politics. In the middle of this, Zohran Mamdani finally broke his silence. In a recorded video statement uploaded to his official YouTube channel, he addressed his constituents directly. The video, titled "Setting the Record Straight," began calmly, his tone measured and deliberate. "There have been serious allegations about my campaign," he began. "I want to make it clear that I have never coordinated with any independent expenditure group or accepted illegal contributions. Every dollar spent in support of my campaign was within the bounds of the law." He paused, looking directly into the camera, before adding, "But I also understand why people are concerned. Transparency isn't just about legality, it's about trust." The statement, while polished and well-prepared, didn't entirely satisfy the public. Critics called it vague, arguing that it avoided addressing specific allegations. Some media outlets described it as a non-apology apology. Others praised him for at least acknowledging the issue. Within hours, hashtags like #ZohranResponds and #StillWithZohran began trending, showing just how divided the audience had become. Political analysts began dissecting the speech in detail. At Politics Daily noted that his language seemed carefully crafted by legal advisors. Every sentence avoided potential liability while projecting empathy. "It's a classic defensive strategy," said one media expert. His acknowledging concern without admitting fault, it's damage control 101. Still, the optics of the moment were powerful. For some viewers, seeing Mamdani's calm demeanor reminded them why they supported him in the first place. Behind the scenes, however, the legal pressure was intensifying. State election authorities confirmed they were conducting a preliminary review of the campaign's financial records. While this wasn't yet a formal investigation, it marked the first official step toward possible accountability. The statement from the New York State Board of Elections read, "We are aware of public concerns regarding independent expenditures in recent elections, including those related to Assemblyman Mamdani. Our office is reviewing relevant filings to ensure compliance with state law." The announcement sent shockwaves through political circles. Cable news networks ran continuous coverage, debating what the potential outcomes could mean for Mamdani's future. Some speculated that if found in violation, he could face fines or even disqualification from future elections. Others dismissed the possibility, suggesting the review would likely conclude without major repercussions. Amidst this uncertainty, the human side of the story began to emerge. Former campaign volunteers came forward, describing the emotional toll of seeing their work questioned. "We knocked on doors. We believed in something real," said one organizer on its Talk Live. "Now it feels like everything we stood for is being twisted." That sentiment resonated deeply across social media, where even Mamdani's critics admitted that the scandal reflected a deeper problem: the near impossibility of running a truly clean campaign in modern politics. As days turned into weeks, the scandal began to shape the public narrative about progressive politics in New York. Commentators argued that the movement's credibility depended on how it handled internal accountability. If progressives can't live by the standards they demand from others, then what moral authority do they have left? Asked a columnist for the New York Ledger. The question sparked intense debate, forcing activists and politicians alike to reconsider the fine line between idealism and realism. In response, several grassroots organizations that had previously supported Mamdani issued joint statements emphasizing the need for transparency while stopping short of condemning him. "We continue to support the fight for housing justice and workers' rights," one statement read. "But we also believe that integrity must guide leadership. We urge Assemblyman Mamdani to cooperate fully with any review." This careful balancing act reflected the wider mood, disappointment mixed with cautious optimism. While many had lost faith in political purity, they still hoped that Mamdani could emerge from the scandal as a symbol of reform rather than hypocrisy. His future depended not just on the outcome of any investigation, but on whether the public believed he had learned something from the controversy. Through it all, the media continued to dig. At NY Politics Watch published a follow-up report suggesting that while some expenditures were questionable, there was still no conclusive evidence directly linking Mamdani to coordination with outside groups. "The picture is murky," the report stated. "What's clear is that campaign finance laws remain deeply flawed, and even those acting in good faith can become entangled in their complexities." The story was no longer just about guilt or innocence. It had become a mirror reflecting the contradictions of modern democracy. Could a system built on private funding and public trust ever truly produce politicians untouched by influence? The $1.8 million scandal had forced that question into the national conversation, and Zohran Mamdani had become its unwilling poster child. #Zohran Mamdani, #political accountability, #campaign finance, #follow the money. By the time the initial investigation reached its final stages, the $1.8 million scandal surrounding Zohran Mamdani had evolved into one of the most dissected political controversies in recent New York history. What began as a local campaign finance story had grown into a national debate about ethics, accountability, and the moral cost of political ambition. Every major outlet had run its own version of the story. Podcasts analyzed the psychology of political downfall, and YouTube documentaries broke down financial disclosures line by line. For weeks, the narrative dominated headlines, not just because of the money involved, but because of what it represented. While Mamdani continued to deny any wrongdoing, the quiet tension around his political future was unmistakable. He resumed his legislative duties, appearing at public events and community meetings, but the reception had changed. Where applause once echoed, there was now polite silence. Supporters approached him with cautious optimism, while critics waited for every misstep. "It's like watching someone walk on a tightrope made of public opinion," one journalist from Pulse Media remarked. Behind closed doors, internal documents from the New York State Board of Elections indicated that auditors had found inconsistencies in reporting practices linked to entities that supported Mamdani's campaign. These inconsistencies didn't necessarily prove coordination, but they revealed a lack of clarity about where the $1.8 million had originated and how it was spent. Some of the spending, it turned out, was routed through organizations registered out of state, a detail that made tracing the true source of the funds even more complicated. The report's findings reignited public discussion. Cable news anchors and social media commentators framed the results as confirmation that something had gone wrong, even if the system itself was partly to blame. "It's not about one politician," said a panelist on at the Daily Politics show. "It's about a structure that makes accountability optional. Zohran Mamdani just happens to be the face of it right now." Meanwhile, the progressive movement in New York faced an internal reckoning. Activists who had once rallied under Mamdani's banner began questioning whether the pursuit of power inevitably compromises integrity. Some organizations paused their endorsements, insisting that reform must come from within. Others continued to defend him, arguing that punishing one individual would only distract from the deeper problem, a campaign finance system that rewards influence over authenticity. Online, the debate became more polarized than ever. Hashtags like #ZohranCleared and #MamdaniMoneyTrail battled for dominance. Each side claimed victory. Supporters pointed to the absence of criminal charges as proof that the scandal had been exaggerated, while critics highlighted the audit's findings as evidence that ethical lines had still been crossed. The truth, however, existed in a gray area. The board's report concluded that no direct evidence of illegal coordination was found, but also noted that the relationship between certain third-party expenditures and the campaign merits further transparency. That one sentence, further transparency, became the phrase everyone debated. For Mamdani, it was both a lifeline and a warning. It meant he could claim vindication, but it also left open the possibility that scrutiny would continue. His statement to the press reflected that delicate balance. Standing outside his district office, he told reporters, "I welcome the findings and agree that our political system needs more transparency. I have always operated with honesty, and I will continue fighting for the same standards I've always believed in." The clip circulated widely, gaining both praise and criticism. Political analysts noted the irony. The man once celebrated as a champion of transparency was now promising to fight for it again, this time from a defensive position. But for many constituents, the statement offered closure. The intensity of the scandal began to fade, replaced by quieter discussions about reform and lessons learned. Still, the damage to his image lingered. Opinion polls showed a drop in trust among moderate voters, even as his core base remained loyal. In the following months, Zohran Mamdani began rebuilding his reputation through action. He introduced new legislation aimed at tightening campaign finance oversight and increasing disclosure requirements for third-party groups, a move widely interpreted as an attempt at redemption. "If this experience taught me anything," he said during a press briefing, "it's that even good people can be caught in bad systems. We need laws that make integrity the standard, not the exception." The quote was shared thousands of times, turning into a kind of political slogan for reform-minded progressives. Meanwhile, political commentators speculated about whether the ordeal would help or hinder his long-term career. Some believed that surviving a scandal with no criminal outcome could strengthen his resilience. Others argued that the shadow of the $1.8 million would follow him for years. "Public memory is short, but digital memory is forever," wrote a columnist at the New York Ledger. "No matter how many policies he passes, Google will always remember the scandal." In Queens, where it all began, the community's relationship with Mamdani remained complex. Many still admired his work on housing and transportation issues, but the trust that once felt unshakable now carried hesitation. "He's still one of us," said a local shop owner interviewed by Astoria Now. "But it's hard not to wonder what's really going on behind the scenes. Politics changes people." That sentiment captured the essence of the entire story, a reminder that even the most well-intentioned leaders are vulnerable to the compromises demanded by power. The legacy of the $1.8 million scandal extended far beyond Mamdani himself. It sparked new discussions among lawmakers about campaign finance reform and digital transparency. Legislative hearings were held to explore the influence of independent expenditures on local elections, and several advocacy groups began lobbying for stricter laws. The controversy had inadvertently become a catalyst for change, a turning point in how New York approached political accountability. For Mamdani, the path forward was both personal and political. He doubled down on community outreach, organizing open town halls and releasing detailed breakdowns of his campaign's future finances online. Each event was an opportunity to rebuild what had been lost: trust. Over time, the noise began to settle, but the lessons remained. He had learned, perhaps the hard way, that transparency isn't just a talking point, it's a responsibility that must be constantly earned. In the end, the $1.8 million scandal wasn't defined by guilt or innocence, but by the public's evolving expectations. In an era when every transaction can be tracked, every receipt analyzed, and every whisper amplified online, the line between perception and reality has never been thinner. For Zohran Mamdani, the episode served as a defining chapter, one that tested his principles, reshaped his reputation, and forced both his supporters and detractors to confront an uncomfortable truth: in modern politics, even integrity has a price. The story may have closed for now, but the questions it raised continue to echo across New York's political landscape. Can true transparency exist in a system powered by money? Can reformers remain pure once they enter the halls of power? And perhaps most importantly, who will be next to face the same scrutiny that once defined Zohran Mamdani's rise and near fall? #Zohran Mamdani, #campaign transparency, #political accountability, #New York politics, #follow the money. As this chapter closes, One question remains: what does accountability really mean in today's politics? The $1.8 million controversy surrounding Zohran Mamdani may have exposed more than hidden spending. It revealed the blurred lines between ambition, trust, and power. Whether you believe he was unfairly targeted or rightly questioned, this story forces us all to confront a deeper issue. How much do we really know about those who claim to represent us? Transparency is no longer a choice. It's a demand from the public that grows louder every day. What's your take? Was this a witch hunt or a wake-up call? Drop your thoughts below. We're reading every single one. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories shaping modern politics. #Zohran Mamdani, #political truth, #campaign finance, #accountability matters.